So welcome everyone. I'm Daniel Deslauriers. Here in Hawaii, it's right now 2 p.m. in local time. Overcast outside. The temperature that I'm embedded in is very nice and warm and then humid at the same time. And it's hard for me to distinguish whether it's the humidity of my nervousness in my hand or is it outside that's humid. I think it's a little bit of both, but I feel, the warmth of the group already, because I know some of you as my students, close students, doctoral students who've been working with me, or students in the Ecology of Ideas class that I'm teaching this semester. And others who are maybe prospective students who are joining in. So welcome for that, or new students the first year. And so there's, we all here, so that's the beauty of it. And you're here because you're interested in hearing about reciprocal embeddedness and about my work and how it's rippling inside of our program. I don't know how it ripples outside of the work, the world, but it's definitely rippling inside of our program. And I prepared a PowerPoint presentation, and I have like gazillions of notes, and I've been preparing for the past 2 weeks, and so I'm a little bit over prepared in a way, and I'm very excited, and at the same time, yeah, I'm so happy, and I want to have a conversation with you. So however it is that it's kind of translating what I'm saying, it's translating to you. Let's make sure that we have a good, 15, 20 minutes at the, inside of the hour, that we can be inside of this reciprocal space. So it's not just me talking to you, but it's us talking together and you talking to the ideas that are presented and so forth. So I'll make sure to, I have my technology here, shows me the time and so forth. So yeah, I'll share my screen. Reciprocal embeddedness is a notion that I've been working with and stumble upon creating, that I'm kind of proposing. Doing this for the past, I would say, 4 years or so. And I find that it's really connected to, other knowledges and other terms that exist out there. And yet I think there's something unique, about it that, I find exciting and I like to share. And maybe I can, in this presentation, we can kind of speak to kind of how is it similar to other, thoughts and philosophy that exist, and an inquiry that people are doing at the moment, and how maybe it's kind of special and it's kind of unique little thought flowering, that beautiful flower there in philosophy, I don't know if you're familiar with this term, cinematographic term, in media res, when a movie's in the middle of things. Well, I think that we always in the middle of things. So yes, we can kind of begin, we can think that this presentation has a certain beginning, started at a certain time, and we all kind of join in to come in at the beginning of this. And yet, the birth of this presentation, my birth, your birth, our birth of anything meaningful is done, in the context of something else. So we're always being birthed into something. There's always a genealogy that we refer to. And, our genealogy, you might think in terms of your, meme, where does my ancestor come from? Where does our ancestors come from? Going back to, Africa Mama, that, the original mother of us all, that has been identified. And then beyond that, the genealogy of us as animals and where we came from, and how we're connected to fish that invented the eyes, so-called, and all of these other creatures that might have invented the organs that we have. I mean, like we kind of inherited all of this, evolutionary creativity that makes our body what it is. So yeah, now we're in the middle of this, and the middle between this and what's to come, the future, right? So we're always in the middle of that, and that's the place of our consciousness, that in the present moment, the place of freedom, the place where we can act in a certain way that will possibly affect what's coming further. So, can we say we end it in the future as well? Well, through our action, maybe. So I'm saying this because embeddedness is at the core of our being. We are never not embedded. So we're never not embedded. So what's new if we've never not something? I think the brain, when something is always that, the brain will just kind of put it in the background. Oh, I don't have to take care of this because, that's almost like taking care of. That's what the brain does. And I think that's what social processes do. We try to attend to things that are kind of concerns that we need to attend. And then our embeddedness, I don't know, maybe as long as we belong enough, and if you not feeling alienated and you need to bring your need to the group or something like that, then it's something that resists in the background. But then I think that talk about it enough in philosophy, and that's the question. Why is it mostly absent from our vocabulary? Both the idea of embeddedness and the idea of reciprocity. So both, because reciprocal embeddedness is really what's new, is bringing those two together. And here I go back to continental philosophy of Heidegger, because he wrote about being in time. So thinking if embeddedness is kind of the deepest strata of being that we have, how does Heidegger kind of talk about it? If interesting enough that it's there, but it's there from the perspective of being thrown in the world. Thrownness is maybe reflecting the time, like thrownness, meaning that when you're born, you don't choose your parents, unless you have a metaphysics that says, well, somewhere you do karmic choice. But you might say in the West that metaphysics is not necessarily operating. It's like, okay, we're the meeting of this ovum and this sperm, and we're coming into this family, and hopefully, you were well cared for and you had secure attachment and you were loved, or else not. If it was not the love in the family, it happened somewhere else, in your life, that you were able to find, what you need to grow into who you have become. But the idea of thrownness is, is very objective to me, almost like you throw a ball. I mean, we don't throw a baby ever. We hold the baby. So this idea that is objective and depicts a kind of a reality from that perspective, for me, has an ontological ouch to it, and doesn't seem to be as real as I think how we came into this, how we all came into this world, meaning like we were a product of gestation inside of the womb of our mother. We all came from a mother. We might be born somewhat, at different times, some more premature and some more later and so forth. And yet, we came from a matrix, the matrix, the womb of our mom. And then when we're born, then we born into the matrix of this planet. We're born into this place where, yeah, we need to learn how to breathe in the first, half minute or minute of our life. Go from, having our mom that is our energy support to being kind of individual and being able to now to enter the space of the breathing of until our last breath. And now we're kind of in that space. So let's take a breath together. I need to take a breath. And just knowing that with each breath is a reciprocal exchange that's happening. And I think meditation, Asian meditation, contemplative meditation, the focus on the breath is part of coming into that reciprocal, embedded space where I'm taking in oxygen that's created by the organism, the cyanobacteria that, created this oxygen for over millions of years that allowed life to happen. I'm still breathing. I'm still kind of co-embedded with that. And I'm releasing CO2 going through the trees that feeds the tree and so forth. So it's constant exchange, reciprocal exchange here. So you could see that there's maybe a more feminine dimension, less objective, much more real around the idea of embeddedness to our situation. Now, I'm not saying that we always feel it. And that there's a moment where we feel like we don't belong, or that like even sometimes I had a sense that I was in someone else's dream, that I was not living the dream of my life, and that I had to kind of find my dream as opposed to being in someone else's dream. And that the process of individuation that comes within the various embedded space that we're in. So how do I define a reciprocal embeddedness? And I defined it as, first I said the property, and then I changed it to the state of two or more holons that are imbricated within each other. So it takes kind of two holons, meaning like the earth could be seen as a holon. It's its own thing. We can view it, as its entirety, and it holds a lot. It's complex, very complex system, and it's holding us. And there's us, that are embedded inside the holon. And yet because we are conscious being, and because we have a sense of that we have evolved, a very, very complex sense of what it is to be in that embedded, within the earth, that allows for a co-constitutive exchange with this that could be conscious or unconscious, like our breathing. I don't need to be conscious of it. I can become conscious of it. I can slow down my breathing. I can make it faster, changing my physiology of my brain, like holotropic breathing. And I think what's kind of here at the core of reciprocal embeddedness, the way that maybe is unique to humanity, is that I consider that our consciousness has boundless matricial properties, so that our consciousness acts as a womb. So let's stay with that a little bit. Like our consciousness as a womb. Like if you look around yourself, like your perception, you look around your room, look at your body, or even feel your body, look at the image of the earth here. Where is this happening? Like where is it really happening? all of this experience. And conceptually, yes, we have a photo of the earth from a satellite, and before we had a photo of the earth, we could at least extrapolate the fact that maybe it's looks like something like the moon, round, and and so forth. And I won't go into the history of astronomy here. And yet the same happens with the universe, that there's, just as the universe is expanding, like space and time is expanding, and we have a picture of the universe, at least inside of a consciousness, that can hold that idea of an infinite space and time that expands. So there's a part of the universe that is doing its thing, and that's our consciousness is doing its thing with it in expanding of consciousness around the very nature of the universe. And I think that reciprocity between human consciousness and the system that we are embedded with, allows for, a stronger reciprocal ties. I often then will, when I'm trying to decide, oh, is this a reciprocal embeddedness phenomenon? I'm asking myself, how is it inside of, how am I part of it? I'm inside of it, and it is inside of me. And I know it's a little crude, but see, that, you might have a credit card in your pocket and think of it as, this is money within your sphere, within you. You have money in your bank account. You have like investment somewhere in your name, some pixel that are doing something, and so that's your tie. You might say you're tied to the monetary system that exists here around the currency of where you are. So you could say, well, it's inside of me, inside of my pocket, inside of my life, and I could say that, well, this is my wealth, and yet we are part of that is part of the economic system that is constantly, moving and shaking through our, what we buy, what we and how we use this this currency, this money. Some people say, well, money is energy, and yes, it allows us to do something, hire someone to do something instead of us, so instead of me spending my energy to do something, I can hire someone who helps me build or garden or whatnot. So we could see here this, I'm inside of it and it's inside of me, clearly around the monetary system and economic system. And funny enough, the idea of reciprocity around system originated in the field of economics with Polanyi in the 50s, and then Garvater in the 80s and so forth. But I asked Google, whoever wrote about reciprocal embeddedness, and they pointed to Garvater, and I went to their source article, and there's nowhere where reciprocal and embeddedness are come together. So I'm thinking, no, it doesn't exist, because I think I'm putting those two words together. So I thought, oh, maybe Garvater talked about it, but AI is hallucinating kind of this, wants to give me an answer in providing that link between the two, at least not in the source article that they're providing. The second example is, and here I need to move faster, but it's one that sometimes may be hard to see, or not, because we're just coming out of a pandemic. So it actually is very easy to see. But I was thinking about this even before, we had the pandemic. So you think of the size of a virus, tiny microscopic. So, but is that the size of, the organism itself? Like, you might say, well, the olon of the one virus is this size, tiny. And yet, when we encounter a virus, it's more likely would be a cloud of it, or would be inside of a contagious space, what we might call in epidemiology, like, oh, this is where that virus is active, because it's being shared by these people or across these species and so forth. And so people will have a sense that really the size of the virus is its epidemiological size. So yes, we don't want the virus to come inside of us. That's one place where we maybe don't want to be reciprocally embedded, meaning like with COVID. But we definitely, if you're in a place where COVID is being, and now it's, all around the world, is like you're inside of it, you're inside of the pandemic space. And if it's not a pandemic, maybe an epidemic, maybe just localized in a particular space. And people can say, well, this is happening in this place. And if you happen to live there, then you're inside of that event. Whether or not you get sick, you are inside of this event. So it's a little bit like aspen trees or mushrooms that, the aspen tree, the being of itself is, like a large rhizome. So the one tree is one, but it's, connected. And the organism itself is, miles square, that's the size of the organism. So we know that we can be inside of what seems to be a forest of of aspen, and yet we are walking within one single individual, so to speak. Now, there's also the idea that culture can act as matrixial sphere of embeddedness, and I think that's not an old idea or a new idea. Sorry, and yet when we say that I was born within a culture, and I think, oh, where do I belong? When I'm thinking in terms of my own belongingness, where I most deeply belong, I'm Quebecois, French speaking. This is my mother tongue. It's the one that comes the easiest. And yeah, I think in terms of identity, it's still where I put my deepest and deepest root as an identity around my Quebecois culture. But I've been living in the US longer than I've been living in Canada. So I became an American citizen, and so I've been embedded in American culture for the longest time, and started wanting to become an actor within it, for the last election and this election, and so all this to say that we come with a language that is sort of like an operating system for a culture. It's not always aligned, but most of the time, you might think, yeah, that's English maybe is a lingua franca. But if you go to different countries, the identity and the language might be aligned right now. And localized language. So reciprocal embeddedness is kind of the idea that the mind acts as a womb. It holds and co-creates the world. And at the same time, we are simultaneously held, by the world within which we're a tiny part of and constantly being born through the life process of becoming and participation. So it's this meeting between two wombs, the womb, the ecological womb and the womb of consciousness. So there is repercussion around that, because how do we hold nature in our mind will translate in how we treat nature. Okay? So if we think that it's just the background of our action, and it doesn't matter what we do to planet Earth, well, it will have consequences that will eventually hit us. I think we see that, and that's the whole debate around global warming that we know about since the 70s at least, and yet there's still a debate up to this time, because it has repercussion as to how we should act. And I think that if we come from a place of individualism, sometimes people don't want to be told it's how they should act in a certain way. So we haven't. I don't think this idea of Gaia, and it's fairly new in like the view of the planet from outside. It's as old as I am, from the 50s or 60s or something like that. So that idea of planetary identity it's just a generation old, and yet it's an important one to have and to nurture. Yeah. Now, embeddedness, comes from my work with an active philosophy and active psychology, and it prioritizes embodied knowing, so that if we only look at the dimension of embeddedness functionally, then we have system thinking. We can understand how the system function, but it doesn't really tell us, like, how does it feel like to be within a particular system? Because that's really embodied knowing is saying, okay, well, how does it feels like to be here, or to be where you are at this present moment? Yeah. And yeah, if the temperature is stable, it feels good. But if the temperature goes above a certain degree, in the summer, or if you are, for us in the I'm in the northern hemisphere, but some of us are even more in the northern hemisphere, where the summer are becoming hotter and hotter. Then it starts to speak to us from the perspective of, it doesn't feel good. I mean, it's like, can I survive even around when the temperature hits a certain degree? So as sensing being, we're constantly interacting with other sensing being objects and information center. I'm thinking of the internet. So there's an aesthetic dimensionality around what it feels like, and then if we think of it in terms of how we are member or reciprocally embedded within certain groups, within organization, then we could start to feel like, what is the quality of that comes out of the group when we are connecting with the group? There's a particular quality that we can sense, that we can know about if we put our mind towards that. And that may be tied to a dimension of reciprocal embeddedness that folds into both epistemology, ways of knowing, and ontology, meaning and just a month ago, as I've been working with the notion of transsubjectivity, and that's what I called that way of knowing, of when we learn about the field in general and its quality, the it of the field through us. There's Charmer and Pomeroy just wrote an article about the fourth person knowing, and it just came out this year, and I thought, oh my God, there it is. I just, like when you get a confirmation that you're on the right track, because other people are having similar kind of insights and are now putting those insights, and they call it the transsubjective as well. So interesting. So we even come with the same term. So that's the aesthetic dimension. You might say the knowing dimension. But with that felt sense of information, it's also telling us, like, what is it? How is it good for me? Like when you are in a group and you feel like there's something is felicitous that's going on, or if we witness like moment of incivility or things like that, it affects us, right? it affects us deeply. And there's research that show how deeply kind of just being witnessing incivility kind of affects us. And yeah, I know in the US there's been like a political theater of incivility, which is kind of fascinating. And it calls the question, oh, what does it mean to kind of project the leader so that, oh, he can say it, I won't say it, but he can say it. So, and then we go and coalesce around that. Um, so, or yeah, I'm not going into the idea of the elections, but I cannot not talk about it, in a way that at least here in the US, you could feel like people are embedded in two very opposite groups and often are in sort of a information echo chamber. They're reciprocally embedded inside of that, but there's very little room for the other group inside of one's and vice versa. And not too many people are doing the bridging work here. And just last Sunday, I was listening to a radio show, This American Life, that talks about a newsletter that does exactly that, trying to bridge, the two sides so that we can be now reciprocally embedded into a larger group. And that's usually what should happen after the election, that, okay, we can relax, that, okay, now our choice and, was not the one that is now going on, and we can relax. But I don't know, in this case, it was so, some promises were made that was so egregious that, it sowed fear among people, and now people have to digest what this would mean. Anyhow, I'm digressing a little bit, but all this to say that there's an ethical dimension about that. So, and is it good for me? Like reciprocal embeddedness, and you could think the question is like, is it good for me? Is it good for us? And us being like our little group, our group of identity, and not the other people, or is it good for all of us? Like, how big can you make the ethical choice? How large is our ethical choice? And I think how large is our ethical choice is kind of connected to how large our identity, our embedded identity is. Okay? So yeah, I could just say, well, is it good for me? And après moi le déluge. Or is it good for us? It already is a little larger, or is it good for all of us? So there's a kind of maybe a developmental dimension here. I know Wilbur has been speaking about that developmentally. This idea of going from egoistic to social to, maybe Gaia and, cosmic. So again, these are not new ideas, and yet I think it plays in a particular way around reciprocal embeddedness. So I talk here about intersubjectivity and beyond, but the idea of reciprocal embeddedness now calls into question the idea of boundary between self and other. And where's the boundary? Where do my boundary ends, and where does the embedded field kind of begin? Okay. And yeah, you might say, well, there's my skin. And there's definitely a boundary, and our skin is sensitive, can feel touch, wherever it doesn't like to be cut, we'll feel it. It encapsulates us. In contact improv, I'm a dancer, we talk about, the skinosphere. And then yet we also call about the kinosphere, which is like the edge of my movement. So my arm can go from there to there. So that's my kinosphere. My body can now inside of a movement with momentum and directionality. And if you happen to be there, maybe I'll touch you. And then a dance can begin. So I can go close to you or far away from you. And then interestingly enough, inside contact improv, when you start meeting with a partner, then that's the idea of like, where's the boundary? The boundary between self and other kind of constantly negotiated around strength. Contact improv, there's no leader and follower that is designated, but it might be at that particular moment and might shift right after that. So it's an exercise of of being able to give clear signal and receiving the signal of your partner and do something very creative with that. And I've been embedded inside of this practice for 12, 15 years now, and it's transformed the way I see the world. Right? And we can, collapse into the ground together. And if you collapse together into the ground, you're not hurting yourself because you're using each other's weight in against one another. So it's not just you going to the ground, but two people that kind of ease. So kind of fascinating that when you fall by yourself, you hurt. If you fall with someone, you don't. What does that say about the boundary of the self? Like right there as a dancer. I'm not afraid of falling with another because I'm not afraid of losing my induction with others because the others are with me. I'm not alone. I'm not to receive the whole blow of what that happened. And yet something potentially transformative can happen in between the meeting of the boundaries. And that's like the place of freedom I was talking about earlier. The freedom in this present moment or at the place of boundary, because now I'm me and, let's say that I'm inside of a group and I'm sharing something inside of a group, a we space that now will inform the group and maybe inflect it in a particular way, this way or that way, and someone else will either amplify it or, just if it's something that needs to be healed, maybe bring something that will help me heal that. And so it heals me and heals the group at the same time, and then we think, oh, the healing is happening. Where is it happening? It's happening inside of me and inside the group at the same time. Okay? And we think of social dynamics like racism or exclusionary dynamics that can't be healed inside of group dialogue, and that's why it's healing, because those boundaries now can become fluid, and now you start to see our reciprocal embeddedness. Now I'm just going to speak for a few minutes more. We talked about transsubjectivity earlier. And for me, the transsubjective field, I find it fascinating because it discloses things like archetypes and like virtues, things that exist in the field, or the opposite, a certain kind of quality that get disclosed when people come together. You might say, oh, that's the when I go in the presence of at CIIS inside the building, I feel good. Or when I'm, within a group of CIIS students, I feel good. Like, oh, what is it? It's quality of the heart. And I think I got to this through my heart knowing dream. It's an article that I've written, and if you're interested, you can email me and I'll send it to you. But I give that article to students. So I started from a very, very, very intimate, tiny little dream that I started questioning, and it opened the whole philosophy of transsubjectivity. So you are the world that is you. Kindred philosophy, indigenous science is steep into reciprocal embeddedness, steep. The sacred fruit, all my relations here in Hawaii, aloha haina. Haina is the land. Aloha is the love. So it's the love of the land. But if you think of it, is it me loving the land, or is it the land loving me? So it's both. But I think most people think of here, oh, my love of the land, but it's the love of the land for you. So it's this reciprocal space. Thinking of intrasnet, the notion of interbeing, interdependent origination, in Christianity. I was thinking, where is it in Christianity? And it's in the communion of the saint. And look at Corinthian, you look at that passage, 12:27. Read it if you're a Christian. I mean, read it over and over again. And you'll see the idea of reciprocal embeddedness kind of inside there. We, of course, have it in African philosophy of Ubuntu, I am because you are. And thinking of in the work of the world as self, self as world, Joanna Macy's work, work that reconnects, and psychoanalyst Braca Ettinger of the matrix border space. So, I mean, these are kind of social science, but we can look into systems too, can look into the systems of economy, embodied phenomenology, deep ecology, indigenous decolonial approach, social system as matrixial. It speaks to maybe a dimension of non-duality in there. And that's my last slides, just to show that some students have kind of ran with it, and did some dissertation. They're part of the dissertation in relationship with reciprocal embeddedness. So Jenny did a research on trauma, safety, and healing via reciprocal embeddedness. And we learned a lot. It was the first dissertation, and we learned a lot. And we learned that reciprocal embeddedness, you cannot just share it as a notion, a mental notion of people to grasp, So yes, there's something to grasp as a notion. There's a mental dimension, but reciprocal embeddedness, in terms of, if it's in terms of embodied knowing, there should be a process that kind of unfold what it means for you. Where is the space where you feel you are safe, that you belong, and so forth, and then building from that. Inside of that dissertation, we introduced the term, or Jenny introduced the term, and some people say, well, no, I don't really relate to it. And so it kind of backfired a little bit. They say, well, I feel like, yeah, we are interconnected, and that's as far as it could go, because that's what they were familiar with, and it was fine. I'm not saying it's, and yet interconnection, it loses the matrixial dimension. You lose it. Connection is like, oh, I'm connected to you, but that's different than, oh, I'm embedded in you and you're embedded in me. It's another layer. It's another layer of connection. Okay. Sydney is now working on a reciprocally embedded spirit of Black awesomeness. Her dissertation is on Black awesomeness, on the phenomenon of darkness, blackness, awe phenomenon, and how we're in awe of the dark, both by its fear and by the awe that it's inspiring. And she translates that around the awe towards indigenous Black American, called that's her term here, Black American, that are descendant of slaves, and that we look at their skills, and that we are in awe of what they do, and often use them to sell things, and saying she's using an hermeneutic based on those kind of popular memes that exist out there in the culture, and at the same time translating that around why is it that people are afraid of Black people, like awe is inside of that place of awe. It's awful or awesome, it's both. It can go both ways. And yet she's speaking of, if we can go into this place where we all come from a Black mother, we all have Black awesomeness, so we're reciprocally embedded inside of the spirit of Black awesomeness. Racism would disappear. It wouldn't disappear immediately, but if we all live to that dimension of reciprocity, it kind of erase the differences that, you know, are amplified in systems. Alana is doing a research on dialogue as a practice, to develop reciprocal embeddedness. And Michael in the EOI right now is working on self-transcendence and value clarification. And we start working on value space as a space. Where does the value come from? And the value come from culture, from a reciprocally possibly embedded. So we are embedded inside of value space, and we can choose the value and clarify them, you know, towards self-transcendence. So that's the work of this dissertation, right? So we don't know where it's going to lead, but I think I spoke 5 minutes too long, and now I'm opening up to you. So it's a lot of thoughts, you can see my excitement. And yeah, now I need to take a deep breath and just want to invite you. Dana, I see your hand is there, and I just want to invite you to share.
Yeah, thank you. That was beautiful. One of your slides said subjective mind acts as a womb. There was other things on the slide, but can you expand a little bit on subjective mind? And then according to your answer, I may have another question otherwise.
Yeah. So phenomenology, I think, it's really the study of the lived experience. And now, where does experience takes place? Where is it taking place? Where is your experience right now? Yes, it's embodied. Yeah, it's in the body. But here we are, I'm speaking words in English, and you are able to understand what I'm saying. At least in terms of this sentence, you understand what I am saying. Okay? So at least you understand that, whether or not you understand what I'm talking about, you know, like you understand the sentence. So where is this happening? You know, it's happening in your subjective mind in a way. Okay? And you have like thoughts that are happening as I'm speaking. So it's happening between us, but it's also happening there. So you holding a view of me or of this entire group right now, you know, through this. So, and you're seeing it through your screen. You might not say in another, if we were in a room, you say, oh, you know, you're seeing the whole room from where you stand. Now we're losing this kind of circle kind of thing. So we all kind of facing a screen. So although we're facing our screen, we're kind of all facing the same direction. But, you know, you could see this, probably your screen. And if you look around it, there will be some other things that we don't see. Hey? You only see around that. So we know it's happening to you, and it's not happening to us while this is happening. And so this is your subjective experience. And I think we behold ideas, we behold experience for the time being you know, there's this, is it the term, this specious present, you know, like the way that the present time, you know, how long is the present time? You know, it's like 1 second, half a second, whatever, however it is, you know, but we hold that. And we can sit with your question a little longer together. And then I can say, yeah, now hopefully I orient you towards that. And then I'm saying, well, what's the boundary of that? What's the boundary of a consciousness? Like, it's inside of me, and yet it's boundless. So it's bounded because it's me, it's my thoughts, but it's boundless because it can expand. There's no place that it says in consciousness that it cannot go there. Eh? That it cannot expand, you know. And that's why we have theories about, you know, the nature of the universe. They're all competing, and all of that, string theory and all this, in the infinitely small and infinitely large. And here we are in between the infinitely small and infinitely large, and we can hold vision of both sides, through science and whatnot. So that's what I mean, but we can hold thoughts, ideas, models, of the world. Yeah.
So is mind consciousness and thoughts, or is mind just the thinking mind, or the imagining, or is mind? And here's the second part of the question, and then I'll mute myself. If all that is embedded, reciprocally embedded, giving and taking of itself within, then is the idea of thinking still something that's self-regulated, some sort of self-regulated mental activity? Because what is the self then? Or is it an intrinsically regulated phenomenon, which is part of that embedded character of? Does that make sense? I'm just trying to talk about the idea of the agency of thinking of within this.
I remember someone talking about defining trauma as that which we can't regulate. That as long as we can regulate it, it feels oddly syntonic. It could be heavy, but if it's too big, then it becomes traumatic. Yeah, like almost like that event, the bomb that it could be somewhere else, not here, but especially if it's close by here, and I feel the shockwave of it, or someone of my family, like that's like, I cannot regulate myself there. It's traumatic. Okay? So I would say that as long as it's not traumatic, yes, we can regulate. And that's often what happened around, the work with trauma is like, how can we now learn to regulate now that I've had that experience that kind of like was that unregulated me. Okay? So, and yet I think in most social system, we kind of tune into each other so that we don't organize it around traumatizing each other. I mean, that's why if we feel like too much toxicity, some people say, well, no, I think this relationship now, it's no good for me because I always feel like somehow I'm traumatized, like when things happen. I will draw. And that's the same way that some self unicellular thing. Oh, no, this is too acid there. I'm going to go there. I know this is no good. So you can't regulate around, what's good for you or not. But then if you're forced to, let's say, coerced to be in a group that you don't want to be in, what do? And there probably is all kinds of possibility here that are open to you. But so yes, that boundary between the self world and the we world is so precious. What is it? Don't try to control something that you can't control. I mean, that's the other thing. Like you make yourself unhappy because you focus on what you can't control, and then so, oh, but what is it that you can control? Around your attention, where can you put your mind so that you can behold a better thought, than the one that may be the itchy part of the group, What are the good part of the group? So that you bring that inside of the group. And there, it's not denial. I don't want to say it's denial, but we have all kinds of ways by which we can regulate ourselves inside. Yeah. If it's not traumatic. Yeah. Thank you. That's a great question around boundary, because now we're talking about reciprocal embeddedness in a psychological way. And that's why I love the work of Brecca Ettinger and you should look, and she has beautiful video online as well on matrixial intersubjectivity. And so Brecca Ettinger, wonderful psychoanalyst. I think you'll get a lot from that. Anthony, you are here.
Absolutely. Good
Okay.
evening, Danielle. Hello to everybody else. What a fantastic presentation. And I was so glad that you were willing to share some of your ideas as they've been forming through some emails. Your comments about virus in one of your emails led to my reflecting quite a bit on the gut microbiome that I added into the chat. And that relationship of reciprocal embeddedness, always happy to have a conversation about that at another time. We also have touched on a couple other things, and they were touched on tonight. I really love the discussion just now that Dana added. It made me think of Marana and the concept of mind as process, and really thinking of that as undermining dualism, and really separating mind and matter, and answering that question from the subjective to the objective by just dissolving it, by rather than making them two separate entities or trying to fuse them. Mind is just a process of flow, and that's really embeddedness to me. And that kind of, I think, is a way to humanize for e-cognition, and going back to Maturana. But I wanted to touch base on just one.
Yeah,
briefly.
mine is flesh thinking. It's flesh,
Yeah.
flesh thinking.
Right.
It's actual flesh doing something. Yes. So definitely, it's not dualist in that way. Yeah. And sure, there's all these ideas of, okay, well, where is it? Where is the consciousness is happening right now? Like what I'm seeing, where is that experience is? And that's the hard problem, so-called art problem of the consciousness study. It hasn't been solved, and but it's a beautiful interface.
Oh, it is, and your work, I think, in a lot of ways, is a component of that. I wanted to just make my final comment that I love the kinetic component of your life and how embodied you are because of dance. And we talk about movement a lot. As you know, my other career is in abnormal movements as a neurologist who focuses in movement disorders. And we've had this conversation back and forth about intersubjectivity that can happen within an individual because they're in different states. There's different cognitive or emotional states, dissociative or fugue-like states. But I've been thinking a lot about the body, and when an individual has a particular disorder in which there are multiple states simultaneously. Diseases can present asymmetrically in one half of the body, or as I commented on in the chat, the concept of Touretteism, where you're in multiple states. And I'm trying to continue to work with what you're talking about on reciprocal embeddedness and your intersubjectivity and transsubjectivity, and understand within an individual who's experiencing things, because you brought up fourth person, that idea of metacognition when you're actually aware also of multiple other simultaneous states within yourself. And you're getting messages simultaneously, but you're also aware that you're getting messages, which, right, is that hard problem of consciousness. It's not computation. It's the fact that we're aware is the hard problem. How do we actually explain awareness? And in this case, that's where we're starting to move, is we look at these disorders, and I'm into this concept of patterned self as pattern, very similar to work like with Sean Gallagher. And this idea of within ourselves, we have multiple patterns simultaneously, and we can be having multiple states simultaneously. What are the boundaries of intersubjectivity when we're talking about multiple states within ourselves? So the concept of reciprocal embeddedness takes on, you talked about quanta. I'm thinking of the very small, right, within an individual, all of these aspects of reciprocal embeddedness within a single person because of these various states. So those were my thoughts to share, Danielle. You're obviously giving me a lot to think about these last couple months. This was wonderful, and thank you for the time to share a few thoughts.
Through the window of my specialty, which is, dreams. So I say, yes, like a dream, in most dream, there's the dream ego, and then there will be other people. I mean, you can have an intersubjective event That is a subjective event. That, like, there it is right there in the dream. Okay. And I'm saying this, and it's consequential because this whole theory came from me thinking about a dream, and it was the heart embrace dream. And you probably read the article where I'm talking about heart knowing as kind of the quality that became disclosed inside of the intersubjective space. So not only is there like a possibility of intersubjectivity within subjectivity, but there's possibility of transsubjectivity, as well. And I think it has to do with maybe that our mind is the matrix for perceiving the complexity of social dimension, and then we have a dream about it. And in terms of these other states that you're talking about, when I was teaching consciousness study, yeah, we were having this discussion, especially around what might be called those states where, ecstatic state, where you kind of leave your ordinary state and then you enter another, like, dissociative state, to which extent, even deep meditation is not to somehow dissociate with your everyday mind, so that you enter another state, like, willfully, so that you can experience something different. So yes, there is all these possibilities inside consciousness, that we can experience with different states of consciousness. Same when you are changing a little bit the neurochemical and you call, with medicine, medicine, I mean, I call that sacred medicine with psychedelics, so you will enter other space. And is reciprocal embeddedness a psychedelic idea? You bet it is. Like, I'm not talking about like, okay, I got the insight from there, but I think that's probably the earliest insight probably came from a psychedelic experience. And that idea of coming in and out of the psychedelic, and like, there the boundary of the selves like totally exploded. And you're being shown, or you're feeling like, yeah, this is the earth. I am the earth. I mean, it's not like that in the psychedelic space. It's not like a thought. It's really what's happening to you at this moment. Okay? And I think that's why psychedelic is so powerful, because possibly it would be interesting to someone to do research about this. It puts you in a place where reciprocal embeddedness is real. It's not just a thought. Okay?
May I add one thought to that, and that is, you're talking about psychedelics, and I just wanted to briefly say that when people think about things like ayahuasca and really dimethyltryptamine or DMT, it's very different than lysergic acid or psilocybin. And the reason is that phenomenologically, people have this deep sense of presence. Presence is a significant part of that experience, which doesn't happen with other psychedelics. And it appears that it may be related to the diversity of neurotransmitter systems that are activated. Ayahuasca and DMT stimulates a number of different serotonergic and dopaminergic sites, very different than LSD or psilocybin, which is strictly a receptor called 5-HT2A. And DMT is so unique. And what's unique about the experience that is often reported is that there is a presence within a community of visual phenomena. And what's interesting is that in the Parkinson's disease patients that hallucinate, they have a very similar hallucination to what happens under DMT, but not under other psychedelics.
And this is your specialty. You could see, like, you are really, I mean, this is your specialty. So you have a fine grain understanding of differences, inside your specialty. And we each have our own specialty here. And then so I just wanted to point that out too, that you will see reciprocal embeddedness from the perspective of your specialty, eh? If you're going to take it on. So maybe we can leave on that thought that, I invite you to play with those ideas, see how they touch you, how they enrich your life. If it's something that, it took that long for me to come to mentalize this, but maybe others, oh my God, I've had that insight a long time ago. So it's fine, like we all at different stages and around this. And so it's both new and old at the same time. I mean, if it's the deepest, again, dimension of our being, it's not new. It can't be new. And yet, if it is that we're not naming it, well, then something is wrong with the way we name our core dimension of our being. So not wrong, but not complete. So thank you so much.